because this customer wanted to buy all this stuff. And he said, the customer didn't say no to anything. What are you talking about? And then his district manager asked him the really important question, which was, well, then how did you know he was done? Or people are not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves just like you. As you said, a no is a no is a no, right? It's the same amount of work. It's the same amount of time. It's everything is the same, except the only difference is
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Man, have I got a great guest today. It's really something that we in sales or in commercial real estate sales get a lot of, and that is the word no. And I'm going to show you how to overcome that with my guest, Andrea Walls. She is the author of Go for No. Andrea, thank you for coming on the show today.
I am so glad to be with you, Joe.
I just think, our industry, when I read about your book, I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. I think we can help a lot of people that are new to the business or have been in business for a while, really help them get over this block from doing the sales and hearing that famous word no and how we can't take it personally. But now I've got to ask, how did you come to write this book? Were you in sales and you just kept hearing no and you figured out, I need to do something about this? Or what was your thought process?
Yeah, so it kind of started from an origin story, I guess you'd say. Actually, it was a situation that happened to my husband, Richard, where he learned the Go for No philosophy. He was selling suits for a living. He had a customer come in who wanted to buy an entire wardrobe of clothing. The customer, everything Richard laid in front of this customer, he was like, yes, I'll take it. Richard wrapped up the sale, ended it. District manager came up who had watched this interaction and said, Richard, do you mind if I ask you a question? What did that customer say no to? And Richard had to think back to this great sale he just had because this customer wanted to buy all this stuff. And he said, the customer didn't say no to anything. What are you talking about? And then his district manager asked him the really important question, which was, well, then how did you know he was done? And so this situation happened to Richard, and that mentorship, that moment led him to changing the way he sold for a living, because he was kind of, as he puts it, kind of more on the timid side, didn't want to look pushy or aggressive. And when he told Joe this story to me, I had my own epiphany, because I actually thought I was a great salesperson. And I realized we all do. Yeah. Most of us anyway. And so I realized that I didn't like hearing no either. And so 25 years ago, after Richard told me this story, and it changed his life, and he became an award-winning salesperson. And we decided that we needed to write a book around this concept, that we wanted to go deep on it and train companies in it. And so for 25 years now, I have been studying failure, rejection, and the word no, and talking about it, and pretty much doing not much else. So I'm deeply passionate about this topic, not only because I've seen what it did for Richard and then later me when we started our own company, I had to go for no myself, but in the thousands and thousands of people who have contacted us over the years, who've read our book, learned from our materials, who've been open-minded enough to say, wait a minute, maybe in my pursuit of yes, I need to be more open-minded to hear no more often.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And boy, commercial real estate, when you're starting out, even when you get to be experienced, you still hear no a lot. But can you kind of take us through the mindset shift we need to have? Because as a commercial real estate agent, I make 100 phone calls or 200 phone calls in a day. I talk to 10, 20, 30 people. 99.9% is no. That is so hard it makes it just so hard to pick up the phone the next day. How do I get myself in the mindset that this is going to be okay? I need to keep moving forward. It's how do I overcome this?
Right. So there's so much to unpack here. I know we're going to go in a couple different directions, but fundamentally the Go for No mindset says this. And by the way, of course, it sounds horrible, right? Because we all want to get yes in any business, in any industry, certainly yours as well, in commercial real estate. So it's kind of like, well, what are you talking about? Go for no. I want to go for yes. The important key here is the subtitle of our book, which is yes is the destination, but no is how you get there. So it is about having a reframe. It's about seeing no as the path that leads to yes. If you want more yeses in your business and your life, you're going to have to simultaneously increase what we call your failure rate. Sounds scary. Nobody wants to fail, but we're talking just about increasing the number of no's that you hear, understanding that when you do that, the yeses will come through. And I think there's a nuance here to your industry, which is different than most. And that is that, and part of it is that numbers game thing, right? You make a certain number of calls, you've got to make a certain number of calls so that you have those conversations and the funnel keeps narrowing down to where you can have those 10 or 20 conversations and then have a meeting and then build that relationship and eventually a deal emerges. But I think with commercial real estate especially, it's like the bigger the deal, the bigger the opportunity, the more that there's going to be rejection involved, and the more people that you have to talk to and gatekeepers involved, and maybe longer sales cycles. So it is about embracing the no's and the obstacles and the rejections as a part of that in order to see those big deals come to fruition. And there's a lot involved in that. Some of it is emotional resilience. So it's learning how to detach from the outcome. Some of it is just understanding and valuing the word no and using it as a data point. There's a lot of nuances to it. And so, like I said, it's a lot to unpack, but that's kind of the fundamental idea, is to use no as the stepping stone onto yes. That's the first thing you've got to embrace, not just accept, not just be willing, but embrace.
Right. I find that I do a lot of mentoring. So I find that when I'm talking to newer agents and they're getting rejected constantly, it beats them down and they just don't want to make the calls because they just know it's going to be more no's. It's the negativity. They just don't want it. How do I get them to detach themselves from that mentality and into a mentality of, I'm going to get so many no's that I know eventually I'm going to get a yes, or I can learn from this, but how do I train that?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, you've got to realize that the numbers game aspect and that the statistics are in your favor. So learning what those statistics are, and it's different for every business. In the world of publishing, which I'm in more now because we write a lot of books, we publish a lot of books, we kind of learned like, okay, you're gonna have a certain number of no's that you've got to collect in order to get that one yes when it comes to writing and publishing a book. Actors know you're not going to go on one audition and be able to get the role. Statistically speaking, you're going to have to go in on hundreds. And so I think knowing your numbers and saying, okay, I have to put in the time and I have to understand that when I do put in that time, when I do put in that activity, that is where the yeses are hiding. And so what happens is when you get those no's, it's not like, oh, it's a failure. It's deflating. It's kind of, you've got to have that. It's one more step closer to the yes mindset. And I think I love that you use the word detachment. We're really big on detaching from the outcome, because this Go for No is a philosophy and a strategy, which is all about being behavior focused. One of the fun things that we do, and this is a way for people to gamify Go for No in their business, is we teach people to set no goals. So what we mean by that is set a goal for the number of no's that you are going to hear. And this can be on any given day or any given week. And when you do this, it keeps you very behavioral focused. So what I mean by that is you might say like, okay, I'm going to make calls, and my goal is to get one meeting, one appointment with somebody to have a conversation. Well, instead of that, because what happens is when you get that one meeting or that one conversation or that one yes, then what do you do with the rest of the day? You're done. you take time off, it's like you stop. But what if you said, I'm going to hear 20 no's today, or I'm going to collect 50 no's this week? No to whatever I'm offering, no to a meeting, whatever. And what happens is when you get that one yes, you just kind of, you go like, okay, great, I'll set it aside. But I still have 35 no's to get or 27 no's to get. And that keeps you in action and keeps your activity going, because you don't let that yes color your results. Because that, it's kind of the insidious thing about having yes goals. And I know we all love yeses and they pay the bills. But when you have those traditional yes goals, performance tends to get limited, right? And in commercial real estate, you own, like, the sky's the limit in terms of your income. So you're the one limiting yourself. So instead of limiting yourself, like, I just need this one yes, I just need to close this one deal, set a no goal, and that will keep you in action and activity. And then, and here's the twist, here's the really important part. And this is kind of where the idea of reprogramming how you think and feel about rejection comes in. When you hit that no goal, so let's say you set a goal to get 20 no's today. When you reach that, that is when you reward yourself. Instead of just, rewarding yourself for the yeses, which we all are so good at, right? We're going out to dinner. We just closed a big deal. So we're covered on that front. No, it's reward yourself for the action and the activity. So reward yourself if you hit the 20 no's or the 100 no's for a week. And that's when you need to get yourself a treat or do something, because that activity, and we all know this to be true, that those going to those networking meetings or making those calls, that's the activity that's going to pay off down the road. And so you really want to reinforce that with some rewards, at least as much as you reward yourself for the yeses.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that absolutely. When you're calling people, something that we do, and we started doing this a few years ago, and we have a couple nights a week with our brand new agents, we sit down and go through, okay, how'd your day go? What worked today? How many calls do you make? And then we start talking about the calls. We say, okay, what was the average length of your call? And the first call is almost always no, when it's, a few seconds. But on their second and third and fourth call, they start seeing the time stretch out. They're getting this person on the phone longer, and they're still getting no, but the time is, so the person is starting to listen to them more. Those little measurements mean a lot. I mean, just finding something that you can measure that give you a little positivity. If somebody's starting to listen to you, and you start seeing a higher hit rate then too.
And I love that you brought that up, because I will add to this. One of the books that we finally wrote after we wrote Go for No, like 2 decades ago, we wrote a book called When They Say No. Because of course it's like one thing to be told, okay, go out there and go for no. Well, what do I do when I actually get a no? Like, what should I think, do? What should I say? And I like that you brought this up, because engaging with people and not letting that no be the thing that scares you off, but instead opens the door to you being curious, is the way to make all that invested time pay off. Invested time being the time that you took getting that lead, maybe buying that lead or finding it, or however it came your way, right? And now it's, instead of just getting that no and going like, okay, thanks, bye, it's being curious and saying, oh, okay, cool. And asking the next question, like, is this a no now? Is this a no forever? Would it make sense for me to follow up with you in 6 months? Would it make sense for me to follow up at the beginning of the year? Digging in and asking those questions and staying engaged. So in other words, lengthening that call time is huge. But again, that all starts with your mindset, and it all starts with how you view that no. If you're seeing it as a failure, if you're seeing it as something that you did wrong, then yeah, you're going to feel kind of embarrassed and kind of ashamed, or kind of like, oh, I did something wrong. You want to hang up as fast as possible and try the next person. Well, wait a minute. There's a reason why you called in the first place. So let's not rush this. Let's take our time and be curious and work on that no.
Yeah. Analyzing your analytics on these cold calls are very important. Why do you feel they said no? I mean, were they just rude and hang up the phone? Obviously, there's nothing you can do about it. But what questions were they asking, or what were you not able to answer? And there's a lot of cold callers that I've run into that will just call somebody and go, hey, are you thinking about buying or selling or leasing real estate? That's not going to get you too far, but there's brokerages that do train that. We train to really bring value on every call. So we have them focus on an area and call that area mostly. But I think a lot of it is just really monitoring your analytics and understanding where the path is, and knowing that there's a difference between persistence and pestering, right? You want to make sure you're being persistent, but at what point are you pestering? And, those analytics will probably point that out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, part of this too is managing fear because, and it's human nature to fear rejection. It is hardwired in our DNA. We are built to not get rejected from the tribe. So we're fighting that kind of that stuff that's been built into us over thousands of years. And here we are in 2025. And of course, our brains aren't prepared for anything. Our brains aren't prepared for AI, for the internet. And certainly they're still not caught up with the idea that you're going to survive rejection. Your brain thinks that rejection is really bad. So one of the things that I teach people is that, and I'm kind of getting to what you just said about persistence and pestering. But one of the things is I always tell people, like, if you have fear around calling, especially for new salespeople, you've got butterflies in your stomach, you feel like your voice is going to shake, you're paranoid about how awkward you might sound. You can't wait for those fear feelings to go away. You've got to act in spite of those feelings. And kind of what you need to do is be mindful. Like, you just recognize, oh, I feel fear, my hands are clammy, my whatever your fear response is, acknowledge it and then say, but I'm going to make these calls with this stuff happening. Because I know for me, oh my gosh, I was always freaked out when I first started making my cold calls, until I got over it and just actually started, like, I would laugh hysterically after I hung up the phone and it was a horrible call. Like, it was just, I would laugh like, oh my gosh, I sounded like such an idiot, and then just found it funny and moved on. So that's what you have to do, right? You have to embrace that fear. So part of this idea of fear is this fear that, what do they think of me? Am I pestering them? And so when you come at those things with just being like a human, is just not overthinking it and saying, like, hey, do you mind if I check back with you later? Or getting that permission to, what would make sense for us at this point based on your goals? How would you like to hear from me? Hey, should we connect on LinkedIn? Is that a better place for us to continue to stay in touch? Whatever. And so I think when you do those things, it does become persistence. It becomes helpful, and it's not seen as pestering. So I'm a big fan of, and this is a go for no thing too, is, again, staying engaged and being willing to ask, certainly tough questions, but you may just, again, want to hang up the phone as fast as possible. Don't do that. Stay engaged and say, hey, how does this make sense for us going forward? You may get a no to that, or you may get the most perfect nugget of information that will turn into a yes down the road.
That's absolutely right. And you're asking the right questions because you want to keep them engaged in the dialogue. And the more they're engaged in that dialogue, the better the results are going to be typically. Well, positive dialogue. I've had some dialogue that maybe wasn't so positive.
Right.
But, we was talking to one of our agents the other day, and he's pretty new and just getting started. And he was in this mindset of, I'm just going to keep calling on those smaller deals. He goes, I don't think I'm ready to move to the next level yet. And I'm like, well, you're never really going to make money on that. For some reason, there was a fear about calling somebody in a bigger company. I said, the work is the same. The results are going to be the same. The money's just going to be better. And we put these roadblocks up. And sometimes these roadblocks that we put in front of ourselves, you really got to think about it. And, confidence is something you need to be working on. And I think they're just more confident. He was just more confident with these smaller clients. This retail leasing is what he's doing. And
Mm.
confidence is something that is we build by doing. Being in the market, making these calls is going to build confidence with you. You're going to learn so much about the market. You may get a no, but if you can get some engagement going with them and learn about what's going on in that marketplace, you're going to find you're building confidence. And another point is I used to do a ton of cold calling. I called somebody one week, they hung up on me. I called them back the next week, completely different person. They were, I mean, same person, but they were completely different, and they were
Yeah,
open, and they didn't remember me from the week before. A
that
lot of
is so.
people, they don't remember you. Don't take it personally.
Well, yeah, Joe, and I love that you said that because it is so funny how we think people are so in tune with what's going on with us. Uh, there's a funny quote out there. It goes, people are not thinking about themselves. They're thinking, or people are not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves just like you. And we think that people are so consumed with what we're doing, and no, the next week they don't even know what's going on with you. A couple of things to the point of calling on those bigger accounts. We've got these 5 levels of failure that we go through in the book Go for No. And level 1 is the ability to fail. It's where we all start. Level 2 is the willingness to fail. And of course, by fail, again, I'm not meaning like fail for just failure's sake, fail without a result. We're talking about failing your way to success, right? We're talking about failing in a positive way so that you ultimately get those yeses. So that second level is the willingness. It's to be willing to hear no more often. The third level is the wantingness. What that means is when you go to sleep at night, when your head hits that pillow, if you think to yourself, wow, I never heard no today from anybody for anything, whether it was an appointment or even a review or a whatever or a referral, you never heard no. That's the wantingness. And that's where we really want people to get to. But level 4 is also a great level. And that's where we say go after bigger no's. So as you said, a no is a no is a no, right? It's the same amount of work. It's the same amount of time. It's everything is the same, except the only difference is except what's going on in your mind, because you're thinking, oh, wow, this deal is 5 times, 10 times what I normally do, or these people are used to dealing with huge organizations, and who am I to get this? And if you have something of value, especially to offer this other person, then you've got to get out of your way and make that offer. And one of my favorite definitions of confidence from Jack Canfield, I interviewed him for a Go for No documentary that we did years ago. And I'll never forget, he said, building self-confidence is the successfully survived risk. And so when you make those calls and when you go out on a limb to go after what would be a big no, which of course in front of every big yes is going to be a big no, because the bigger the deals, the tougher the challenges, the tougher the rejection, the longer it's going to take sometimes. And but when you do that, that is how you build your confidence. And then once you experience that and you go like, I survived it, it wasn't so bad. Now it's where you can start to get comfortable, but you don't build that comfort level. I don't believe you build that comfort level sitting on the sidelines and um and well, I'll give you a perfect analogy. The very first, I was terrified of speaking when I first started. When Richard and I first launched our company, he was the speaker of the two of us, and I did all the sales and marketing. And eventually, after a few years, he was like, hey, you need to get out there, because we were speaking to a lot of audiences that had a lot of women. And while I loved this concept of Go for No, I was terrified of speaking. So I started practicing and going to smaller events. And then my first really big event was 2,500 people. And the truth is that 2,500 people or 2,000 people or 100 people Like, you might as well just go and get the 2,500 person venue out of the way, survive that, and now it's like it doesn't matter. Now I can handle 500 people and 1,000 people because I did the big one. So that's what I have to say about just the idea of getting outside your comfort zone and going after those big deals.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with goal setting too, right? What do you advise people on goal setting?
Well, I think if it's kind of funny that you'd ask that, because we talk so much about no goals, which sounds like, oh, you just want us to focus on no's. I think that it all comes down to planning and having a vision, right? Where do you want to be in 6 to 12 months short term? Where do you want to be in 18 months to 2 years? And where do you want to be longer term, more like 5 or 10 years? But the how is the key, right? It always comes down to, how are you going to do that? How are you going to reach those goals? You've got to have them in order to know what direction you're going to go. And a concept like Go for No is the how. It is the, how are you going to get there? You're going to have more conversations. You're not going to run from hearing no. You're not going to make assumptions about what somebody is going to decide, what they have to spend, what they're going to do, who they know or don't know. You're simply going to ask. One of the things that I coach people on all the time is, look for those Go for No moments. You see them all the time in your business. And when you have that opportunity where it's like, should I ask, or should I keep my mouth shut? The rule is, you've got to ask. And that's how you get to your no goal, is by executing on those Go for No moments. And I think that that's ultimately how you're going to get to your ultimate goal, your vision, if you will, is by making sure that you are executing on the how.
Yeah, completely agree. It's really something. I was reading Diary of a CEO, actually, listening to a podcast, Diary of a CEO. Stephen Bartlett is the host. He's phenomenal. And he has Jimmy Fallon on. And I don't know if anybody knows Jimmy Fallon's background, but and I'm not done listening to it, so I don't know the whole thing yet, but his thing from when he was 15 years old is, I'm going to be on SNL. That was it. I'm going to be on SNL. He struggled. He was in New York, struggled. He came to LA, struggled. And then when he got this opportunity, he put to be on a show. It was a sitcom, run the pilot. He wanted in the contract, if SNL calls, I can get out of this contract. That's how much he was living. He was taking boxes off the street and creating his furniture. And yet he believed in himself so much that he wanted that in the contract. And the producer of the TV show goes, well, we've never done that before, but okay. And long story short, the pilot didn't make it. The show got canceled. He got a call from Lorne Michaels' team and went back and interviewed on SNL, or auditioned for SNL, blew it, came back to LA, worked for another year or two. They called him back in for another one and nailed it. And he got on SNL, and Lorne Michaels put him on all these other shows. But his focus on SNL from when he was 15 years, he would have starved himself to death. And he had written down when he was very young that, I'm going to be on SNL by the time I'm 25. And he got on by the time he was 23. But it was unrelentless pursuit of getting on that show. And as commercial, which, by the way, you should check that. Diary of a CEO is an incredible podcast. Been watching it for years. But that focus that he had, every real estate agent, commercial real estate, or even residential actually anybody in sales, if you want to succeed, that kind of focus is really what we need.
I love that story. And yeah, persistence it's everything. And I think oftentimes you can take your goal and reverse engineer it. We kind of teach that from a Go for No standpoint. How many no's are you willing to go through? How many rejections are you willing to hear? How much time are you willing to take? And my attitude is always whatever it takes, especially when it comes to follow-up. That's also a huge Go for No strategy, is following up on the people who said no to you. People who win, I have found, who turn that invested time into profitable time, who pay attention to that follow-up, who build those relationships over time. It's amazing how that stuff will pay off later.
Yes, it is. And here's the thing, Andrea, the technology that's out there, especially with AI that's coming, it's getting so, there's no reason not to be following up anymore. It's not on a
Oh
spreadsheet
yeah.
anymore where you can forget about it. There's reminders that come up, so make sure you get good tech, and that follow up is the key. And that's where the money's at. I mean, typically on the first call, I think you've been around sales long enough. You don't. It's not going to happen unless you're just purely lucky and call at the right time on the first call. It's going to be call number 3, 4, 6, 10, and so that's going to come from the follow up. So
Yeah.
but then also, I think one thing I always like to touch on in sales, a big part of what we're doing is listening to. As salespeople, we just want to talk all the time, right? We want to talk fast. We want to get our words out before you can say no. But a big part of it is listening. And I don't know if that's something you touch on in the book or not, but I think that's something that's very powerful for salespeople.
It is super powerful. No, we actually don't. We leave the listening to the listening sales experts. We're the no sales experts. But at the beginning of our conversation too, Joe, you said something, and I can't remember exactly the context, but it had to do with confidence. And one of the things that we talk about in Go for No, the sequel, which we just released a couple months ago, is about learning that sales often is a role, and it's almost like you kind of have to become someone else. And we have a scene in our book, and Go for No is a fable, so both books, actually, the original and the sequel. And we've got a scene in the second book where the daughter Cassidy, she's a new salesperson, and she tells her dad, like, I can't sell, and she really thinks sales is kind of sleazy. And she's like, I can't do this. And he says, well, you need to become someone who can. And I think that where it comes to persistence, when it comes to listening, when it comes to all of the different skills, is you need to work on not telling yourself and looking for all of the things that are hard in sales and the things that you can't do, and step into the role almost like an actor and say, I'm just going to become someone who can. I'm going to successfully survive these risks. And then eventually you don't feel like you're in a role anymore. Eventually that becomes who you are.
Mm-hmm. It is. When I first started calling, I mean, I'm a small town boy from the Midwest, so shy, and I had to start cold calling. And it was miserable and painful, and I hated my life. And then I started figuring, you know what, these people don't know me and they don't know anything about me. And it got to be easier. And then I started having fun with it. I'm like, okay, they hung up, on to the next one. I'll call that guy back next week. And, but it's just plays into what you were just saying. Yeah, I got to be that person. Like, okay, that's water on a duck's back now. I'm on to the next one. And I just became that person that I truly wasn't. That wasn't the real me, but that's who I became when I started doing the cold calling. And so, yeah, I think you're right on. But I tell you, when that first deal came, because we were struggling, and I see it in our agents when they get their first deal from their cold calling, that it's like a light turns on, and all of a sudden the cold calling isn't so painful anymore, because now they know they're one step closer to the next deal and then the next deal, and they've laid that groundwork by making these calls and hearing all these no's. That's really the foundation of any salesperson.
It's so true.
Yeah. So, well, what's next for you guys? You got a new book. When was the book out, the latest book?
Yeah, so Go for No, the sequel, we released that just a couple months ago. And it's kind of funny because we had the original Go for No for 20 years. and then we wrote When They Say No, and then we finally decided, you know what, it's time for a sequel. But the original is kind of fun because it's about a guy who wakes up one morning in a house that belongs to a wildly successful future version of him, and he's not sure how it's kind of a supernatural story. He's not sure how this other him got so successful, and the secret, as it turns out, is that this other version of him is willing to hear no more often, where he is not. So that's how we learn it. It's kind of a fun story.
Well, that's good. I'm going to put it up on the website, and it'll be under tools, I believe, and I have books up there, so people will be able to go on and to the website and find the books, and your books will be there. And also, I'm going to put a link down below to them. Now, how do we get in touch with you?
I'm well branded Joe. So it's go for no. If you want to, and I would encourage people to do this. We've got a fun quiz on our website. It's called the NQ quiz. Now it's not an IQ quiz. It's the NQ. It's your no quotient, which is the number of times you're willing to hear no and keep going. So it doesn't actually test the number of times. It actually tests your mindset and where your mindset is in relationship to success and failure and hearing the word no. So if you're wondering like where am I, right? Do I have a high no quotient, a low no quotient? Come to goforno.com and take the quiz. That's probably the next step. It's easy, it's free.
Beautiful. I'm going to make all of our agents and myself take that test just to see where we're at. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today, Andrea, and all this great information. I think anybody in real estate, we all need a little brush up on, getting used to hearing the word no. And so I thank you for that.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Great to be with you.
And for those of you watching, if you could, please give us a like. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.